In the ever-devolving landscape of the gaming industry, there seems to be shining examples of game development poking through the slop that reminds us that games are all about feedback loops. Schedule 1 is yet another cultural phenomenon indie title that has taken the first place title of games played and sold over the vast majority of AAA games. The reason for this is two things in my mind. Firstly, the gameplay loops capitalizing on reward through accomplishment, leading to a sense of progression. But secondly, the cultural attitude of the time that it came out. So let's look into the psychology of why a game about selling drugs had everyone so addicted. Gameplay is king, as they say, and Schedule 1 represents something that the mainstream industry tends to put second, and that is that games are about tactile feedback loops. In recent times, modern games have suffered from a couple of things. One of these things is the cinematic nature of storytelling being prioritized over gameplay loops. The meme is everywhere that games have become movies more so than playable experiences in the larger budget side of the industry, and largely this is correct for a great many titles. Secondly, game scale has increased to the point that instead of focused, meaningful progression, games are littered with too many small, vapid dopamine hits scattered across a world too shallow to keep the attention of the people that want to play something. Both of these issues are really the same issue. Instead of embellishing the game with collectibles and cutscenes, these things distract you from giving actual input to the experience. These things aren't bad on their own, but when they constitute the reason for play, they lose their appeal really quick. Schedule 1 does the opposite of this, and makes the process of collecting items into the main thing you need to do to craft and grow your character's abilities. Starting with nothing to your name but a small amount of cash means you have to begin practicing these skills immediately in order to grow your wealth and status. At the end of the day, this game is a small business simulator, and you are an entrepreneur. You facilitate the means of getting product to your customers. You cultivate the customers that you get, and you learn how to improve your product. Once you get efficient at these repetitive actions, the game hits you with an even more efficient system: outsourcing. From meeting up with a dealer, to buying multiple spaces for room to grow, to hiring workers, to ordering product directly to your buildings, you are always getting the feedback loops of creating resources, increasing revenue from scale of resources, using increased revenue to buy more means of creating more resources. It's simple, but incredibly addictive, because you always feel like you are growing. No pun intended. This feedback also doesn't feel like a chore, because it's not micromanaged by the game's narrative flow. This is because the gameplay progression is the narrative flow. Don't get me wrong, following a good story in a linear game can be a great experience too, but the progress is gatekept by levels, cutscenes, and area restrictions. These can be good loops themselves if the level design is catered to progressing. But in a game like Schedule 1, you have choice. The smaller scope and intimate setting of the map allow for this choice to feel like you are conquering something, though, and conquering it at the scale and pace that you want. It harkens back to what made MMOs so successful. Focus on individual skills with options for how to level up those skills. But within each of these methods, there is an accumulation, a production via accumulated resources, a reward for production, and a means of accumulating more resources to hopefully repeat the loop, but even easier or at a larger scale than before. Okay, so we understand why the gameplay works, but could there be a cultural aspect to why people play this game too? Well, of course. There is a cultural aspect to everything that people do. Even though the game was made by an Australian, a large number of players come from North America and Europe. Regardless, this game definitely has a very Western cultural flavor to it. The idea of selling weed, meth, and cocaine in an urban sprawl and the suburbs is very much associated with places in the United States. It very much embodies the conflict between government regulation and individual liberty. The name of the game itself is talking about a US classification of drugs with a high addictive potential for abuse. Doing drugs is very much a symbol in this context for rebelling against authority. Much like government regulation, the gaming industry has been regulating the experiences of players for quite some time. They've created systems and formulas to try to maximize the amount of return from their citizens as possible. The funny thing about habits, though, is that they are rooted in choices. When games start making choices for you, it becomes less about your personal player experience and more about watching the viewpoints of people that develop the games. When these people can usurp the habits of individuals, they feel like they have a certain amount of control on influencing the thoughts of individuals. As William James said, habit is the enormous flywheel of society, its most precious conservative agent. It alone is what keeps us all within the bounds of ordinance. In other words, there's an economy around people's habits, and the social fabric of our society hinges on the routines of individuals. People having the liberty to choose their habits are making a statement by playing this game. They are rejecting the formulas of the elite and trading them for a game developed by one guy who creates his game without paid promotion or producer middlemen. Much like the symbolism within the game of rejecting authority to sell illegal substances, people are buying this game to fight the authority of the corrupt gaming industry. This is also a larger cultural vibe in Western society as well. In America in particular, there is a rejection of systemic authority because of corruption. I mean, hell, they even voted in a guy who was infamous for playing the system in several different ways. And this was, of course, in protest of the status quo. Much like selling drugs, it is not the ideal situation to be in. But when the people in charge are making money off of essentially the same things that they stigmatize, the hypocrisy is a bit too much for the average person to take seriously. In this way, the game feels like a taste of that power and control. Becoming a drug lord that starts from nothing, slowly taking over a city and taking everyone's money. This game is a logical power fantasy in a world where wealth is controlled by a very small number of people. It's a taste of how corruption can be profitable, but in a way that feels somehow more wholesome than the corruption of the real world itself. The tongue-in-cheek nature of the game's antics really give us all something to laugh at, and at the end of the day, it feels very relatable and human. The acknowledgement of human nature from the perspective of one person is the real reason that this game resonates with so many people. It's not a corporately fine-tuned product. It's a mechanically addicting statement by an individual. I'm sure you all have been enjoying Schedule 1 on your own time, and if this was an interesting take on it for you, feel free to like and subscribe for future takes on games and media. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite experience with this game has been, or any cultural significance that you can think of that this game brings to the forefront. I appreciate you guys for watching. Feel free to come back next time to the Dutch Ritz Party.